welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, CREDC, for inviting me here today to speak with everyone. I appreciate folks taking time to Zoom in and hear what we have to say. I'm going to kick straight off to the topic of Clark County and where we are right now and where we will be moving forward based on some of the current market trends that have been observed over 2020. So I'm going to start with my least favorite topic this year, which is this year. I feel like I need a nap. I've gone into bear hibernation mode where I just kind of want to get in a cave and stay there for a while, but that's not how life works. So I'm just kind of plugging through 2020. And now that we're nearing the end of it, I've noticed a couple of things that sort of stand out as the three P's in my book: politics, protests, and the pandemic. They're all a big thumbs up in my world, but they're definitely having impacts on business models and real estate decisions, which go very much hand in hand when it comes to environmental impacts that these three seem to have. So when we look at 2020 and we look at the politics, that's probably the least surprising thing that's happened because these were scheduled and we knew these were coming, and we can pretty much guess based on historicals that, you know, when we have a big election year, a lot of things at some point during the year go on hold and wait till we can see the results of all of our voting efforts. This year, taking the national situation out of the consideration, because the things that we're watching most closely are tax measures on both sides of the rivers and how that might impact business decisions moving forward. So there are a couple of them on the ballot in Multnomah County, which is the county that tends to migrate the most northward, that should they pass, there's some payroll implications that we've already had a number of businesses sort of earmark as this could change where we decide to locate. And if that's the case, Clark County could most definitely be an in-migration beneficiary. Conversely, there appear to be a couple of candidates up for consideration in Clark County that have talked about property tax increases to offset sales tax losses to Portland that, again, could have some implications for Clark County, though I don't expect that to actually drive anything southward. We'll go to the next favorite: protests and other city challenges. So clearly this is more of a Portland problem than anything else. But right now we're dealing in a perceptions versus reality situation where for the first time, Portland has been very much thrust into the national perspective and in a very real way with regard to some perceptions about what's going on in Portland relative to the protests and subsequent issues that have come along with some of that. It's true, there are definitely some problems going on. I would argue that the national media has definitely exploited and blown some of it out of context, because my colleagues and I field calls weekly from folks out of state asking what the heck's going on, and, you know, oh my gosh, is this just everywhere, and, you know, are people fleeing, and so on and so forth. And, you know, it's not Armageddon, for heaven's sakes, but there are challenges. And the reality is that depending on how this plays out long term, again, Clark County could be a beneficiary because businesses decide, oh, to heck with it, you know, we're going north to something that's slightly smaller and a little calmer, so seems, and you know, we'll just make it a little easier for our people. Or if they're larger businesses that run on what we call that hub and spoke model, where Portland would be a spoke, they may look at this and say, we're pulling out of the region entirely. And that could have some impacts on Clark County that are not as beneficial. So, you know, like it or not, there's still a symbiosis there between Clark County and Portland that does have some reciprocal impacts that aren't always the greatest. And then our last and most favorite topic is the pandemic, of course. And I'm just not going to talk this one to death. We all know the negative impacts that it has had, and we also are well aware of how it's wearing on people. But some of the things that I noticed out of it as this has gone on over several months is that there have been some bright spots. So for instance, industrial users, like industrial product is leasing before it's built right now. There is such an expansion going on with anybody who is associated with e-commerce or 3PL. And this is, of course, being driven by all of the click on Amazon and other e-commerce providers to have things brought straight to the house. And it's been pretty interesting. We expect that to continue in the foreseeable future. Healthcare. Once we got through the very early stages of the onset of COVID, where healthcare was a bit overwhelmed, and some procedures were put into place, they now seem to be back up and running at a breakneck pace. And most of what I'm hearing is we need more space, we need more small site clinics, we're at capacity. This is a new model moving forward so that in the event something like this occurs again, we have a structure that can handle it. And then technology and bio/life science firms. Those groups, if they have any need for lab space, assembly space, manufacturing or testing, they are continuing forward because that is not a work from home model that's going to happen. So what does the Clark County picture look like moving forward, taking all of this into account? You look really good. So there's the good news. Your population growth has been very steady for the last 10 years, but it's been at a very, what I call digestible pace. So you don't appear to be having infrastructure overrun in the way that so many other West Coast and Western cities are struggling with. Your year over year growth is at 84%. That's a really good click. And what this means is that you are going to continue to be attractive to groups of people who are probably going to enhance your labor pool. So when we're talking about that, you can see that your median age is 38.7. That's a really prime age target for businesses when they're contemplating talent, which is their top priority when they're looking at relocating or setting up a business. So we constantly talk with tenants about this. We talk about, does a market have the labor that can align with the skill sets that they're seeking? What is the depth of that labor pool? Can they accommodate scaling with that business as they grow? And this becomes a really important factor when they're making these decisions, because if it feels like the inventory of talent is too shallow, they start to worry about long-term growth effects. This is where Clark County is doing well, because you continue to draw in exactly this demographic, and this becomes more and more attractive to companies as they're looking. Obviously, costs are always in there. And again, Clark County fares very well here. Payroll, which is usually the second highest cost for a business payroll is the highest cost for most businesses. Real estate's the second highest cost. And, your salary averages for your market are much more attractive, particularly for the West Coast. Your tax exposure is much more attractive. I cannot tell you how many people I heard move from California to Washington because the jump in savings for them on the tax basis is just mind-blowing. And your cost of living is really good and healthy, much lower than a lot of the other West Coast locations and Western states locations. And then last but not least, amenities, quality of life, community, sense of community and arts, outdoor access. We constantly are being asked to rank that for our clients. I cannot overstress education K through 12. That is a huge one, especially if it's young families looking to relocate, and Clark County performs extremely well there. And then one that's maybe popped up more in the last 5 years or so is the environment. And that's sort of a bifurcated. The obvious, is the air clean? Is the water clean? Do we have any threat of shortages in the future? You can watch California with constant blackouts and brownouts. You can talk about Arizona and water shortages, and these are becoming things that are more real for companies as they look to locate. But then also on the social diversity side, is this a community that really supports itself? Are they making efforts and strides to be more inclusive? These are now factors that are being considered by companies as they assess markets to locate to. And thus far, Clark County is faring very well. Looks like we just had a poll. Looks like workforce stays at the top. Does not surprise me. So when we talk about Clark County overall, the really nice thing that you have to offer is you have a lot of little burgs that anyone can pick and choose from. So Camas, Ridgefield, Washougal, Salmon Creek, Battleground. You can go down to the waterfront project, which is really becoming quite the icon for the county. And when companies can see all of these different areas that are really well developed, and they have farmers markets, and they have, you know, dirt bike competitions, and they just offer a lot of different community options, this becomes attractive as well, because then they don't feel like they're getting pushed into one option and one option alone, which typically means limitations, whether that is increased cost of housing or access to some of the other things that are of importance to them, being education and outdoor access opportunities. So I thought I would highlight a few of the projects in Clark County just to sort of demonstrate that Clark County is doing well and is reading the pulse properly. So I tend to try and compare downtown cores because everything sort of emanates out from downtown cores. So if you take the downtown core of Vancouver and you take the downtown core of Portland and you compare two pretty basic benchmarks, that being multifamily and office vacancy rates, you can see that Vancouver is doing much, much better than Portland for some of the reasons that I previously outlined, but also this is something that has been building for quite some time, many years now, and you're starting to see the full benefit of some of the investments you've made, including downtown apartments, the waterfront project, and other sort of more mixed use projects that are planned a little bit outside of downtown, but offer a lot of the attractiveness of enclosed communities with retail, office, you know, art studios, things of that nature. We expect all of this to continue to outperform for Clark County moving forward for the next 5 years. As the region itself starts to adjust, and frankly, Portland just can't hold a whole lot more right now. So you're going to be the natural migration path. So the other thing that I thought I would touch on is how businesses are pivoting as a result of COVID, because this is something that Clark County, like every other market, will have to be mindful of and be ready for in order to make sure that you stay on the right upward trajectory for growth. Our firm is 80,000 people worldwide. We invest quite a bit in our research department. So we are constantly running surveys every quarter. This is our third survey on workplace. And the survey includes surveying Fortune 1000 partners, investors, lenders, to try and get a sense of, as we're moving through this pandemic, the changing attitudes about how you're going to utilize the workplace, because it's been flip-flopping since this started. First it is everyone's working from home. Well, actually, first it is we'll go back. Then it is we're all going to work from home. Then it's back to no, we need to go back and have some space. And it continues this flip-flop. So right now, where it's really starting to settle, the dust is starting to settle, is that they want flexibility. And it's probably going to end up being some sort of a hybrid model of the two, where you have some portion of your workforce working from home for some portion of the week, but you're still going to need to have a space where they can all meet periodically and collaborate on projects, because as great as technology is, it still isn't the end all be all when it comes to communicating things effectively and efficiently. So when we break this out and look at the benefits of the work from home flexible workspace arrangement, we look at it from the employee side and we look at it from the employer side. And when we interviewed the employees in the survey, a lot of what came out of it was a desire to have an improved work-life balance. Felt like they could manage their time a little better if they had an opportunity between working at the office a few days and working at home for a few days. Obviously, reducing commuting time and cost. Depending on what market you're in, that becomes a serious cost savings, both time and money. Um, we also found that boosting employee morale and autonomy. So avoiding letting employees feel isolated by working from home all the time, because that has started to present itself as time has passed. But also letting them have some choice and autonomy on, when they're in, instead of feeling like they're under the demands of some sort of time clock, have factored in. When you flip this over to the employer's perspective, like it or not, if a lot of big corporations move this way, which they are, from technology to finance, they have decided the flexible work model is the best way to attract and retain talent. And if we're going to go back to the number one consideration, which is talent, then this is kind of where it's going to have to go. What it does allow employers to do is implement more efficient strategies with their real estate. So we fully expect decreased footprints, because you don't need to have desks for 50 people. You'll need desks for 25 people, because at any given time, you'll have 25 in there at one point. And this just obviously translates down to a much smaller real estate presence. And again, that being your second highest cost behind payroll can translate to a significant savings. They also, to date, and I kind of put a caveat on this, find that productivity is up with the flexible model. That may hold. I think that's also going to be a variable depending on the type of industry you're in, because some things I just don't think working from home will work out as well as working in an office with your teammates. And if you're sort of a project-based firm, say engineers, for instance, I think that's that's a place where it can get a little more complicated to try and rally everyone on a Zoom call versus having everyone in the office comparing notes. So when we talk about the flexible work plan, we take a look at the space planning and how some of this translates to the actual space. First thing a lot of these groups have been doing is, over the last 7 months, they've been surveying their own employees to find out how they feel about coming into the office, and they're gleaning that down to a attendance rate. What is the average time that any employee comes to and spends within the office? And that's really where you have to start to figure out what kind of office space you may need. And that's going to depend on commute times. That's going to depend on the independent roles of the employees. Some departments probably can do more from home than others. That will then help you sort out your seat sharing ratios. So for instance, CBRE has been in this flexible model for years. It was just something that they decided to implement quite some time ago. Our local office just hit the timeline to make that transition. And we don't have assigned seats. We have assigned areas so that certain groups make sense being near each other when they're in, but we don't have assigned seats. And if you tried to allocate a desk for everybody that works for CBRE, they would not have one. But we're not all in there at the same time. Our work model doesn't even line up with that, because we're oftentimes out of the office for hours each day. So this allowed them to compress the footprint and then utilize the desk ratios in a way that even saved them money on furniture, frankly. So you're not buying as much furniture. Work and culture for this is probably the trickiest, to be perfectly honest. As long as you make sure that you still have collaboration spaces. So you're still going to need some conference rooms. You'll probably need more conference rooms than you've had before, but this is in lieu of so many desks. You're still going to need some spaces where people can kind of blow off steam, a la the rec room or the break room. But getting people comfortable with this idea of sort of hot desking takes a little bit of time. It's harder for groups where your demographic is a little more advanced and has been used to having their assigned desk or having their own office. But overall, what we find is that people end up having more in the moment conversations, and that ends up leading to other productive results that they had not anticipated. So it's really quite effective once implemented. It just takes a little bit of time, and we expect this to continue as you're moving forward with flexible workspaces. So when you flip this to the building owner side of this, as we've certainly had a lot of surveys of building owners about what they're seeing from their tenants, what's being asked of them as a result of the pandemic, HSE, or health, safety, and environment, has now escalated to the top. So what are building owners doing to increase filtration with the HVAC systems? They're almost all going to have to start putting in HEPA filters. Do you have UV light systems that are being used to clean off common surfaces like elevator buttons or handrails? Janitorial is a very real area where now the janitorial services have got to now bring in another layer of cleaning. It usually means more labor, more time. We expect janitorial costs as part of operating expenses to increase moving forward, which is something that tenants should be aware of, because that's going to get passed right on to you. We also expect, as I said, footprint size to decrease. So how are owners prepared to make use of their floors in a smaller footprint manner rather than full floors, because we think this is going to get a little trickier too, as groups need smaller space. And then last but not least, building owners' ability to convey communication about what's going on in the building relative to any outbreaks, because things of that nature moving forward obviously are now going to be of greater importance than we had ever imagined. So in summary, I still need a nap, but I think I might be more rested in 2021. I'm thinking maybe June. But Clark County, I think, is really well positioned to benefit from what's going on across the country right now. I think in-migration of residents and businesses, particularly along the western regions, is going to be something Clark County is going to continue to see. I think the industries that are going to perform the best over the next 5 years are going to be healthcare, because you have a growing population, which means you need healthcare to serve it. I think home building is going to do quite well because you have a growing population and houses are affordable. So I think home builders are going to be sticking around up there for quite some time. I drove through Ridgefield last week and could not believe how much was getting built up there. I think industrial businesses continue for I don't even know how long. I can't tell you when it might stop. For me, it seems unstoppable, frankly, as e-commerce and online sales just continue to grow and expand, and industrial tends to be the beneficiary there. And then again, the bio life sciences and certain technology firms. I'm sure everyone in Clark County is aware of two of the biggies that are doing really well right now. Those are great stories for Clark County. And as those kinds of successes happen, it just puts you more in the spotlight for other businesses around the nation who start contemplating a relocation. So hang in there. But I do think that the future looks really, really great for Clark County. Thank you so much. Happy to take questions.
Kristen, well, that was just such an amazing presentation with great and wonderfully rich content and data. You truly represent a unique perspective with the volume of inquiries and the source of metadata that your company CBRE invests in. So we appreciate that overview. We have a question about timing. Now, you had indicated in some of your comments that for in terms of industrial land vacancy or industrial building vacancy, commercial building vacancy, you were showing such incredibly low rates in Vancouver. And can you share with us a little bit about the sense of urgency that a client reaches out to you with, and what the timeline looks like for their relocation at this point in time?
Sure. So with regard to industrial, and for a greater in-depth look at that, feel free to reach out to me and I can get industrial reports for folks. But with regard to industrial, right now, what they are seeing is something they've never seen before. I think CB just concluded a survey of industrial users about 2 weeks ago. And what they're finding is that this region is actually in the top 20 for markets that the space is leasing before it's built, So the demand is way outpacing the inventory. And if it's tied to e-commerce or 3PL, we have a couple of clients in that realm. It's usually we needed it yesterday. So as far as site ready, we need it site ready now. And to the extent anything can be escalated to deliver it more quickly, the better. For example, you know, the Portland Meadows site just on the other side of the river. Before Prologis has done anything, they have already inked a lease for, I think, 85% of it. One obvious user who very much likes that location because of its easy access to both sides of the river, which is key to them. But that is also with the understanding that Prologis has to turn this site around lickety split.
Thank you for that feedback. We have another question from our chat box, and I'm going to broaden it out a little bit. It has to do with transportation and proximity. So one of the things we celebrate in Clark County is that you have a diversity of living experiences that are all relatively close together. And Councilmember Greeley said that sometimes he hears that Washougal as a principal downtown district is seemingly far away, and wanted to get your pulse on transportation infrastructure in the decision-making and relocation criteria of businesses you work with.
Sure. So that's an interesting thing. I would tell you that a year and a half ago, if companies were looking to locate to this region, it just depended where their employees were going to be commuting from. And if they were commuting from somewhere, we'll say south of the river or west of I-5, then yes, Washougal to them seemed to be quite a commute. Now, we tend to try and put it relative in terms of what is real traffic. I mean, I know people think it's really bad here, but I don't know. Try driving into Seattle. You can't even get past Tacoma. So depends where the company's coming from. So most of the companies we deal with are coming out of California. Traffic becomes irrelevant to them because it's all better than what their people are used to dealing with. If they're starting to if they're locating here and the premises, they're going to do most of their hiring of existing people already. That's where maybe it gets a little trickier. I think in the last year, for places like Washougal and Camas, I don't think that's becoming as big a deal. I think the traffic piece has kind of gone to the wayside, in part because there aren't as many cars on the road. So we have a number of colleagues who moved from California up to Camas and come into our office, and you know, even back pre-COVID, the statement was, this is not that bad. I mean, we don't leave right at 5, we wait till 6, but it's not that bad. You don't know what bad is. And now I think it's just negligible. It's kind of a pretty drive because traffic has eased up. We'll see, you know, once there's a vaccine and we see what people decide to do about the workplace, if it comes back into factor. But you know, as Camas and Washougal bring businesses of their own in and have a lot of great affordable housing options, I think some of this will mitigate itself. You'll just have it packed in right there.
Mm-hmm. When we think about retaining and recruiting a top talent workforce, what are you seeing in terms of trends in alternative transportation? So vehicle electrification infrastructure is a priority. Last year, CREDC's Fall Luncheon, which brings this into top of mind for me, was on the future of transportation, and would just be interested in hearing your thoughts on these long-term investments that communities are making in new transportation infrastructure.
Yeah, EV charging stations. We got a lot of clients asking that to be part of the package when they look at locating. So I think that's going to be the biggest deal for Clark County. And the more that can be put in place in advance of bringing in tenants, the more it's going to give an advantage to various owners over other sites, because that is becoming sort of the biggest push, I would suggest. South of the river, it's still talking about mass transit, but I think that's probably just about capped out, and the EV charging station has already been implemented in most of the buildings.
Very good. Well, I see kind of scrolling down the chat that that your colleague has highlighted just recently christened CBRE research on top life sciences sectors. And maybe I can invite you to say a word about that and our region's competitiveness.
Yeah, so that's one that's burgeoning really nicely for you. Clark County was very wise on the front end in terms of investing in attracting life science firms at their very formative stages and then helping usher them through their growth. I think that things like the investment in the downtown waterfront and a lot of your other recreational parks throughout the county have also been a wise investment because a lot of those life sciences firms, the talent isn't here, they're bringing it in. So this is in mass a relocation. So because the talent is in Boston, in Seattle, and down in San Francisco, where you have these long-standing life sciences hubs, but you also have very high costs of living. And they are now making the case that you can have a very attractive and affordable lifestyle working for a strong performing life sciences company right here in Clark County. And that combo with your timing has really nailed it, frankly.
Thank you for those comments. Certainly the onset of new amenities and the really visible ones on the waterfront are an invitation for people to explore broader and farther east into the county. And so it's amazing to have that that gateway infrastructure that was really conceived 20 years ago. So a good reminder to all of us that while amenities and infrastructure are in such high demand, it was really the vision making of a couple of decades ago that helped lay the groundwork for what we're seeing now, and communities' continued investment in that front. Could you just briefly share about any multi-tenant fears or concerns of return on investment for some of the higher occupancy buildings?
So on the office side, yeah. Well, obviously we're seeing a lot of sublease space right now. It's the multi-tenanted buildings. Companies are still very much in a holding pattern about what they want to do. And I honestly don't think they're going to have it completely figured out until we have a vaccine and the threat of the association of COVID with imminent physical harm dissipates. And until then, most of them are kind of punting. And as this goes on, I think a lot of them are, rethinking how they're going to do this moving forward. What it means for assets that have a lot of tenants, well, I can tell you right now that downtown Portland isn't going to be selling anything anytime soon. The valuations were really high prior to this, as they were up and down the West Coast and East Coast. So in some respects, this is a natural correction because that's pretty typical. But I don't know how this will play out moving forward because this region hit an all-time high in terms of those valuations. And building owners are trying to decide if do they need to keep a fitness center, or is this becoming a problem because it's a common area and people are concerned about, spreading something. And all the things that were building amenities are now, being reassessed as could it be a building risk? And a lot of owners have spent a lot of money putting those into place. So time will tell. I think outdoor space will become the thing that's the new big gotta have amenity, because we've all decided, okay, if we're all outdoors and we can spread out a bit, then I'm a more comfortable person about potential exposure of things. But yeah, I just don't foresee that the office product having a gangbuster year anytime soon. Industrial product, yes. I think the capital markets will be scrambling for opportunities, but I just don't know if they'll let them go right now because I don't think a lot of investors are convinced they've maxed it yet.
Wonderful. Well, I see one last sort of high note question that I think would be great to end on and then transition to the next portion of our program. which is a comment on the recent IPO of ZoomInfo and what sort of visibility that creates for Clark County.
Well, that was one of the companies I was nonchalantly referring to, as everyone's familiar. Visibility wise, it's fantastic for Clark County. I mean, we've fielded a lot of calls from out of state from people inquiring about this. And it's really great that this group was able to achieve this in your market, built it there, and can demonstrate that they are able to build it there. So I expect this will be something that Clark County should probably use as one of their, come talk to us leading key points, that you can do this here, you can bring it here, you can build it here, you can IPO it here, and everybody's really happy and it's going gangbusters. It's one of the shining stories in an otherwise somewhat abysmal year. So that's also great because you guys own that.
Very nice. Well, a Zoom round of applause for Kristen. She did just an amazing job taking us on a tour of the data and the perceptions that are out there about the community. And of course, we love that so much of what you had to report was positive for us. So I'd like to ground some of your comments in what some of our teamwork and what we're seeing at the forefront of the inquiries we're receiving. So as Kristen and CBRE spotlighted, life sciences is one of the project areas where there's a lot of traction and a lot of project activity right now. And we're seeing that also in the inquiries that are reaching out to our CREDC business development team. So on the slide we have up here, you'll see a national breakdown of project activity. And we're delighted that 3 of the 5 key sectors across the country where there is a lot of momentum are ones that are represented in our top 5 target sector groups. So biotech and life sciences, advanced manufacturing, and software and IT. Also, you can see on the bar chart, the font is a little bit tiny, but I'll narrate for you that the big bar on the left is a trend of magnetism towards, quote, suburban areas of less than 1 million residents. And so certainly Clark County fits into that definition. And I think will continue to be a trajectory that we'll watch as companies look to move, as we continue to process through and respond to business relocation and expansion inquiries. And over the course of this year, it's been a very positive indicator for our business development team to see that the number and the quality of inquiries that we're responding to is quite high. So at any point in the year, we've been actively pursuing and responding to between 25 and 40 business expansion and recruitment inquiries. Right now we have 25 in the pipeline, which is up from 2019. So we're doing all that we can to nurture those leads, to work with our partners to facilitate the types of outcomes that we would like to see growing our workforce base and growing our presence in an industrial and commercial sense here in the county. So our team is also working on a couple of great initiatives, which some of you have had exposure to. In February, we launched the Just North initiative as a successor to the Your Journey Starts Here branding work that we started back in 2018. And you'll see a poll popping up on your screen here to ask you about amenities that you believe young college-educated talent prioritize. The Just North initiative is designed exactly for that, to appeal to young college-educated talent, both from the sense that we want to retain that talent that's growing in our school system and through Clark College and WSU Vancouver here, and also recruit talent from outside of the region that can help us spur the industry growth in the higher wage, higher skilled job skill sets. So we're very happy with the way that the branding has come together. You can see the individual jurisdiction badges, and we welcome our board and our investor community and our community at large to visit the Your Journey Starts Here site. There are employer spotlights, there are profiles of young people who are invested in living here and are thriving. And we have the opportunity together to use our social media networks to brand. You can see justnorth.org has been populated in our chat box. And just north of the Columbia River, we hope that people will explore and visit. So we look forward to amplifying that campaign in a big way. And if you have any questions, certainly drop them in a private message in our chat box or reach out to me after the fact. You can see, interestingly enough, the poll results have popped in, and it appears that outdoor recreation is what our current Zoom audience feels is one of the major or the highest draws for young college-educated talent. So we'll have the opportunity to talk about that a little bit more in our breakout sessions. I also wanted to highlight another section of the Just North campaign, which highlights the amenities in our respective jurisdictions and some overarching ones across. So we know that there is a high quality of life and a high standard of livability here. And we've worked with a design firm to present this information in a way that, that we believe will be interesting to the young educated talent base. Certainly people here can have access to world-class education, amazing healthcare, livability statistics that are highly competitive, and as we mentioned a little bit with the transportation infrastructure, that we're accessible in so many ways to some great world-class amenities. And grounding our commentary just a little bit further, I wanted to share with our audience and refresh the 5 strategic objectives that fall under the pillar of our collective Clark County Comprehensive Economic Development Plan under the placemaking category. So those 5 strategic objectives are empower placemaking strategies. Part of our decision to host this luncheon theme today is so that we can continue to do that and encourage each other and gain each other's feedback. To embrace opportunity in the urban center, and Kristen certainly highlighted what the amenity means for our visibility and the region's visibility. Telling the story of place, which we're doing also through our Just North campaign. Make employment areas shovel ready. This year, we just launched the 2019 results of our employment land study, taking a look at industrial lands and what it will take to make them viable. And then lastly, determine regional infrastructure and transportation needs in particular. And just this week, CREDC hosted another I-5 task force meeting to receive updates about the program office and what we can do to support that reinforced infrastructure. So just a quick visit in how our work and how our presentation today is grounded in the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan that was adopted by all of you in the community.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. What a great presentation by Kristen. I think we learned some information. Perhaps we had information that just confirmed what we already knew or suspected. I certainly got a lot out of our SWOT analysis breakout session and hope you did as well. Clark County is well positioned to emerge together from this pandemic, something that we will accomplish through the collaborative efforts of the community leaders in this virtual room. We appreciate you joining us today. And if you are looking to engage with CREDC through investment, sponsorship, committee engagement, or an exchange of ideas, we welcome you to participate with us as we continue to expand the existing base, support people, and create place. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.